I wanted to show you how to work invisible cast on in pattern. Here it is on 1x1 ribbing, and as you can see, it is invisible. The ribbing just leaps into existence, which is pretty cool. Here it is on a 2x2 rib, and because these little bumps reminded me of beads, here I've worked it on 1x1 rib, and I've added giant beads in the cast on, which is really silly, but it kind of gives you ideas of how you might play around with this. Now this cast on happens to be stretchy. Now why is that? Invisible cast on is really just a row of knitting that has been folded over a line or wire. And you see when I do that, you see how you end up with a stitch and then a stitch behind and then a stitch and then a stitch behind. So that's what you are doing when you do invisible cast on. And here is how you do that. Now Elizabeth Zimmermann did this with auxiliary wool. I am using a collage circular needle. I use the one with the floppy cable because I like the way the floppy cable works for this application. And I have attached my yarn with a slip knot. This does not count as a stitch in the cast on. This is merely because I don't have 3 hands. Here's my needle for casting on. Now the easiest way to make a stitch in knitting is yarn over. Except, you know, if you do a bunch of these, like a bunch of yarn overs, not really very knittable. So let's try that again. If we start with a yarn over, and then we duck the yarn underneath the wire, now we can do another yarn over. And now we can duck forward and do a yarn over. And we can duck back and do a yarn over. And we can duck forward and do a yarn over. And back and do a yarn over. And forward and do a yarn over. And back and do a yarn over. Now, if you know how to do slingshot longtail cast on, or you know how to do Judy's Magic cast on, you can put the wire on the index finger and the working yarn on your thumb, and you can do something that looks more like this. Yarn over and behind and yarn over and in front and yarn over and behind and yarn over and in front and so on, which when you pick up speed you can get really quite fast at it. And those of you who have done Kat Bordy's Mobius cast on will probably recognize this. That particular cast on is closely related to this cast on. So there's stitches on the needle ready to be worked off, and in the second video I will show you how to work them off in pattern for either 1x1 or 2x2 ribbing.